So you found some data. You're really excited to figure out what happened in the housing markets in Texas during the Great Recession, and now you got to get it into R. If things are set up nicely, which I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, you can go into R and say read underscore CSV, put in the name of your data set in quotes, and run it. And your data set will be spit into the R console. Now, that's not super useful. We want to be able to work with that data, so we can assign the data to a variable name. So I'll assign it to Texas data. And the data is now stored here. We see in the global environment object called Texas data. We even see how many observations there are and variables. And that was not so bad. Now, in reality, things aren't going to work quite so smoothly. There's a few subtleties which I want to share with you so that when you're reading data, you're not getting a headache. You're just getting data into R. So there's three things to be aware of. One, we need to be able to tell R where the file is located. Secondly, we want to deal with different file types. I showed you how to read a CSV. What do you do when you get an Excel file? Finally, some data is formatted in unusual ways, and I'm going to show you a few tips about how to deal with that. A computer knows where files are located by giving it an address or a file path. So my Texas housing data is located inside Coding Lab Examples, which is a folder inside my Documents folder, which is inside of my Home folder. So this tilde/document/coding lab example/Texas housing data.csv is the full file path. If I put this in quotes and I say read CSV, it's going to find the file without a problem. Another way to get to the right spot is to start in the right folder. So if I can start in my Coding Lab Examples folder, which is inside Documents inside my Home folder, then I can just say, please find Texas housing data in this current folder. So what does that look like in R? First, how do we know what working directory we're in? There's a very useful function, especially in the beginning of your time with R, called getWD. That'll tell you what your current working directory is. So if I run this, it tells me my current working directory is users Arianesfeld, which is a long form of the tilde we saw before, /documents/coding lab examples. So I'm in the working directory where my data is, which is why I can read it directly. What happens if I change my working directory? So let's say I want to change my working directory to documents. First, just double check. I changed my working directory. Now let's see what happens when I try and read the data. Oh, I get an error. And this is a very useful error. It says the data does not exist in the current working directory. And then it even tells me what my current working directory is. So the way to deal with that again is to change your working directory to the right spot. So I'm going to change my working directory back to Coding Lab Examples. And now I can read Texas housing data without a problem. So we know how to tell R where the data is. Now what should we do when we get data with a different format? Often in public policy school, you're going to get data from economists who like to use stata. They'll give you a DTA. Or, if you're working with anyone else in the world, you might get a file from Excel. It's no different than you reading a CSV. We have a set of functions that are very similar with the same format. It goes read underscore and then a file extension type. So we have read underscore DTA and read underscore XLSX. And otherwise, they're very similar functions. The caveat is you have to load these functions from outside packages because they don't come with R off the shelf. To read a stata file, you need the Haven package, which also deals with lots of other statistical formats like SPSS, I believe. And to read Excel files, you need read Excel. So very quickly, I load the library Haven, and then I can read a DTA file. So I have a DTA file from some political scientists about Mexican cartels, and now the data is in R. With the Excel, I have my Fed data, so it's from the Federal Reserve. Let's look at the data. I can use this view function and the name of the data. So I'm going to view the drug war data, and it gives me this nice spreadsheet-like format. This is my drug war data. I can see we have different years, municipalities in Mexico, etc. Now let's take a look at the Fed data. Oh, this is weird. License. Oh, so instead of getting the data, we got a license. Why would that happen? Here, let me show you. If you open the Excel file, you see that there are a bunch of different tabs. We don't want the license tab. We probably want the data tab. Oh, and when we look at the data, sorry this is so small, but we see that there's an extra line at the top. All right, so how are we going to deal with that? The first thing is we're going to remember we can look for help using the question mark. So we're reading an Excel file, so I'm going to say question mark, read XLSX. When I look at the help, I'm going to look at this API here and see what jumps out to me. Number one, they know that Excel files come with sheets, so they have a sheet argument. If we put a sheet name here, we should be able to just skip the license part. And skip. Skip thing seems like it might be helpful to deal with that row at the beginning of the data. Now, if I'm not sure what these mean, I can come down to the arguments and see some more information. So for example, skip, it says the number of rows to skip before reading anything. Let's try and put that all together. So I'm going to read XLS, same file name, but now I'm going to add a sheet. And the sheets, unfortunately, I can't just tab and figure it out. I have to look at the file. The sheet I want is data 2013. And then I wanted to skip one row. So let's see if this works. There's a function called head, which will just show us the top of the data, the first 6 rows. And now we see that we got the data that we wanted. To close out, I want to show you a few more functions that are useful when you're loading data and you just want to look at it a little bit more carefully. So we noticed when we put head, there's a bunch of variables we can't see. If we want to see all the variables, we can use this function called glimpse. So glimpse will spit out the data horizontally. So each column is now a row. And we can see the names of all the different variables. So this is a Fed survey, so it has a bunch of weird indecipherable variable names. And we can see what the data looks like. There's a bunch of zeros and NAs, etc. If only we want the names, there's a names function. So I can say names Fed data, and I can see all 488 of the different variable names here without knowing what the data looks like. Finally, sometimes you want to be able to capture the number of rows programmatically. And there's a function for that, nrow. So I say nrow, and it tells me I have 1,333 rows. Now you know how to read data into R and how to avoid some of the common pitfalls.